Welcome to Geology 108, Life. Life originated on Earth when the first living cell began to replicate, sometime before 3.5 billion years ago, at a time when oceans still covered most of the world, where basalt volcanoes and protocontinents of granite represented the only land. Earth is habitable and is able to offer a life-supporting zone by virtue of its particular relationship with the sun. Earth is the only planet we know of where water exists at the surface in solid, liquid, and vapor forms. Earth is also the only planet on which we have so far confirmed the existence of life, either in the past or in the present. The amazing ability of water to dissolve and transport other chemical compounds is what makes it such an ideal medium for the origins and evolution of life. All known life on Earth is dependent on water. So in that key aspect, Earth is a pretty special place. What does it mean to be alive? What is this phenomenon that makes Earth so different from the rest of the known cosmos? We might try to describe life as a set of distinctive, intertwined traits, complex structure, coupled with the ability to move, to grow, to adapt, and to reproduce. We might point to such distinctive cellular attributes as a membrane or long strands of the genetic molecule DNA. But no matter how long the list of diagnostic traits, there always seems to be exceptions. For example, lichens don't move, mules don't reproduce, and viruses can't reproduce on their own. Chemistry provides a firmer foundation for defining life. All living things are organized molecular systems that undergo chemical reactions of astonishing intricacy and coordination. Every life form consists of discrete assemblages of molecules called cells, separated by a molecular barrier from the outside environment. These clever collections of chemicals have evolved two interdependent modes of self-preservation: metabolism and genetics, that together unambiguously distinguish the living from the non-living. Metabolism is the varied suite of chemical reactions that all life forms use to convert atoms and energy from their surroundings into more cell material. Like tiny chemical factories, cells take in molecular raw materials and use those resources to facilitate movement, repair, growth, and from time to time, reproduction. And like chemical factories, as opposed to raging forest fires or the nuclear chain reactions of the first element generating star, cells control and regulate these reactions by positive and negative feedbacks. Metabolism alone isn't enough to define life. Unlike their non-living environment, cells carry information in the form of DNA molecules, and they can copy and pass that molecular information from one generation to the next. What's more, the information can mutate. Molecules are often copied with errors, which provide genetic variations. Mutations that thus promote chemical novelty. Innovations that enable the population of cells to compete against other less efficient populations, to survive during times of environmental change, or to expand their foothold into new environmental niches. Life abounds in extreme environments. Some microbes thrive in acidic streams flowing from mine wastes and boiling pools above volcanic zones. They survive inside frozen Antarctic rocks, and they persist on stratospheric dust particles kilometers above Earth's surface. Vast microbial ecosystems kilometers below Earth's solid surface, where cells live in the narrowest of cracks and fissures and subsist on the chemical energy of minerals, may well account for half of Earth's biomass, as much as all of the trees and elephants and ants and people combined. Considering these extremophile organisms, all life on Earth lives within a zone no wider than 20 kilometers. It is the zone where interactions between the geosphere, hydrosphere, and atmosphere create a habitable environment. The place where Earth's 4 reservoirs interact most intensively is a narrow zone called the life zone, located between 10 kilometers underground and 10 kilometers in the atmosphere. Biologically, life is defined by 4 essential properties that differentiate living organisms from non-living matter. They are metabolism, reproduction, growth, and evolution. Metabolism is the set of chemical reactions used by organisms to derive energy. Growth is the accumulation of mass. Reproduction is the production of live offspring. Evolution is the change of characteristic traits over long timescales, leading to diversification. In certain circumstances, non-living matter can do some of these things. Crystals, mountains, and clouds can grow, but they lack the other characteristics of life, including the ability to reproduce and to metabolize food energy. Viruses also can grow, and their atoms are ordered in biopolymers. However, viruses utilize the reproductive machinery of other organisms to replicate themselves, and they lack the ability to metabolize. Hence, viruses are somewhere between living and non-living things. Landscapes, climate, and other complex systems can evolve, but they can't reproduce. A short definition of life that captures the activity of a live organism and its place in evolution may be as follows. Life is a self-sustaining chemical system capable of incorporating novelty and undergoing Darwinian evolution. One crucial characteristic of life is metabolism, which refers to the entire set of chemical reactions by which an organism derives energy for life processes. Some organisms create their own food energy from inorganic materials available to them in the environment. Others derive food energy by eating other organisms. Organisms that produce their own organic food energy from inorganic chemicals are called autotrophs. Most autotrophs produce food energy by the process of photosynthesis, in which inorganic carbon dioxide is combined with water in the presence of light energy to produce sugars in the form of carbohydrates. Oxygen, which is generated as a byproduct of photosynthesis, has been critically important for life on Earth. Photosynthesis is by far the most important autotrophic process on Earth. A few autotrophs produce their own food energy from inorganic chemicals in non-oxygenated or anaerobic environments through a process called chemosynthesis. In these environments, chemoautotrophs are able to synthesize organic compounds from inorganic minerals in the absence of sunlight. Large populations of animals, can be supported by chemosynthetic production at gas hydrates, cold seeps, isolated cave water, and hydrothermal vents. Hydrothermal vents occur at seafloor spreading centers where the oceanic crust is actively rifting. In these tectonic environments, ocean water is in close contact with the underlying hot mantle. Water circulates through cracks at the rift, re-emerging in the ocean floor as plumes of superheated water called black smokers, which are loaded with dark mineral content. Organisms that derive food energy by feeding on other organisms or on organic compounds produced by other organisms are called heterotrophs. When heterotrophs consume another organism, the energy stored in the organic compounds is released by one of two metabolic processes. Organisms that cannot tolerate oxygen obtain their energy through the anaerobic process of fermentation, in which carbohydrate molecules release energy as they are partially decomposed to form alcohol, carbon dioxide, and water. Heterotrophs that are oxygen tolerant obtain their energy through the aerobic or oxygenated process of respiration, which means that they use oxygen to break down carbohydrates, releasing carbon dioxide, water, and energy. Respiration is many times more efficient than fermentation as a metabolic process. Growth is a fundamental characteristic of living organisms. Growth involves the ordering and organizing of atoms and small molecules to make larger molecules. At the microscopic level, this ordering of atoms and molecules can happen in two ways: polymerization and crystallization. Polymerization is the stringing together of small molecules, like beads on a necklace, to make large chain or sheet-like molecules. Crystallization is the packing of atoms or molecules in ordered geometric arrays. Crystallization is what happens when the randomly oriented H2O molecules in water vapor form ice crystals on a cold window pane, or when atoms gather to form mineral grains within a cooling magma body. In both polymerization and crystallization, an ordered pattern of atoms or molecules is replicated throughout the structure. There is an important difference, however, as polymerization absorbs energy, whereas crystallization releases energy. All growth in living matter involves the polymerization of small organic molecules to form large organic molecules called biopolymers. Therefore, growth in living organisms requires a source of energy, which is acquired through metabolism. Another important feature that distinguishes living from non-living things is that living organisms can reproduce themselves. The genetic plan of a living organism is encoded in its DNA, deoxyribonucleic acid. A macromolecule composed of two chains that coil around each other to form a double helix. The chain-like molecules are held together by organic molecules called nucleotides that store genetic information. DNA contains a sequence of 4 nucleotides called adenine, guanine, thymine, and cytosine, but often abbreviated with the letters A, G, T, and C, respectively. DNA is carrying genetic instructions for the development, functioning, growth, and reproduction of all known organisms and many viruses. The information and instructions stored in the DNA are decoded and executed by RNA, ribonucleic acid. The macromolecule RNA encodes the genetic material with 4 different nucleotides, A, C, G, and U. RNA has a similar structure to DNA, but is single-stranded. At the same time, RNA has the ability to fold up into complex shapes that have the ability to catalyze some biological reactions to make proteins. Hereditary information is encoded like a barcode by the order in which nucleotides are stacked in a DNA molecule. The information is passed along by being written to a molecule of RNA. The RNA then directs the order in which amino acids assemble to build proteins, which go on to influence the structure, growth, and maintenance of the organisms. Genes are regions of DNA coded for specific proteins that perform particular functions. In most organisms, the genome, the set of all of an organism's genes, is divided among specialized areas called chromosomes, which act as carriers of genetic information. Different types of organisms have different numbers of genes and chromosomes. Most bacteria have a singular circular chromosome, for example, whereas humans have 23 pairs of linear chromosomes. Genetic information from DNA is passed from one generation to another as the strands replicate during cell division and egg or sperm formation. Single-celled organisms reproduce by asexual reproduction. After a period of growth, the genetic material is duplicated and the 2 resulting copies are placed in new separate cells, a process called binary fission. Reproduction in multicelled organisms occurs either through sexual or asexual reproduction. An example of asexual reproduction is live twigs of some trees that, when stuck in the ground, take root and produce a new tree. Sexual reproduction involves combining genetic information from 2 different individuals. This genetic information is then passed along to the resulting offspring, resulting in genetic recombination. Copy of genetic material during reproduction can include errors in the genetic encoding called a mutation. Mutations cause a genetic variability that allows the affected organisms to adapt to new environments or to outcompete other individuals, or underperform and be eliminated in a process called natural selection, the survival of the fittest. Evolution is the process whereby the genetic makeup of species changes over time and new species arise. The basis for evolution is the passing of genetic information from one generation to the next. This leads to the expression of heritable traits in offspring, such as a certain eye color, tail length, or number of toes. Individuals in a population whose characteristics help them survive reproduce successfully and adapt to constraints and changes in their environment and leave more offspring than others. Their heritable characteristics eventually come to dominate the population, gradually changing the overall genetic composition and therefore the characteristics of the population as a whole. If the characteristics of one portion of the population change to the extent that those organisms can no longer successfully breed with the rest of the population, then a new species is born, a phenomenon called speciation. While change is typical in all parts of the Earth system, the process of biological evolution only occurs in living organisms. It is therefore a fundamental characteristic of life. Evolution is achieved through the process of natural selection, in which individuals that are well adapted to their environment survive and are reproductively successful, whereas individuals that are poorly adapted to their environment are reproductively unsuccessful and therefore tend to be eliminated from a population. The twin pillars of evolution are variation and selection. Variations come from the genetic recombination during sexual reproduction and by mutation during cell reproduction. Variation provides a population of mixed genetic material and physical traits on which natural selection can operate. The forces of natural selection may be adaptation to environmental changes, survival to predation, competition with other populations for finite resources, or expansion into new environmental niches. Speciation also occurs by genetic drift following geographic isolation of populations. The modern theory of evolution is attributed to Charles Darwin for his work on the origin of species, published in 1859. A foundation of evolutionary theories was also put forth independently by Alfred Wallace around the same time. The theory of evolution states that all present-day organisms are the descendants, through a gradual process of genetic change and adaptation, of different kinds of organisms that existed in the past. The theory of evolution implies that all species evolve from a parent species, contradicting preconceived notions that species are immutable. This was a revolutionary idea during an era where deep geological time was not recognized, the forces of plate tectonics were not identified, and the biological mechanisms of reproduction had not been unveiled yet. Today, evolution forms the unifying theory in biology, much like plate tectonics constitutes a unifying theory of geology. Organisms have disappeared by extinction, just as new types of organisms have emerged by speciation throughout the history of life. We refer to the ongoing disappearances as the background rate of extinction. Myriads of species have come and gone during the Phanerozoic. The evidence of extinctions in the fossil record of marine animals is extremely detailed, showing that the average time span of an ocean-dwelling species is about 4 million years. But it varies among groups. Mammal species last about 1 million years on average. It is estimated that more than 99% of all species that ever lived on Earth, amounting to over 5 billion species, are now extinct. The ultimate fate of all earthy species is extinction. A cell, the structural and functional unit of all living organisms, is a complex grouping of chemical compounds enclosed by a membrane. Cells are constructed of organic molecules and biopolymers, including proteins and nucleic acids. The cell's membrane, a thin layer of lipids with proteins embedded in it, separates the material inside from the outside environment and facilitates the controlled exchange of materials and energy between the cell and its environment. Many bacteria are unicellular, consisting of just one cell, but most organisms are multicellular and consist of hundreds to trillions of cells. Cells may be small, about 10 to 20 micrometer, or large, 50 micrometer to a few centimeters in rare cases. Whether large or small, however, All cells are of two kinds, prokaryotic and eukaryotic. Prokaryotic cells are generally small and comparatively simple in structure. These cells house their DNA with all its genetic information in a poorly demarcated part of the cell. The main body of the cell, called the cytoplasm, lacks distinctly defined areas in which the various cell functions are carried out. Most importantly, the portion of the cell that houses the genetic information is not separated from the cytoplasm by any membrane. Prokaryotes occur as bacteria and related organisms called archaebacteria and cytoplasmas. Eukaryotic cells are larger and more complex than prokaryotic cells. Their genetic information is housed in a well-defined nucleus that is separated from the cytoplasm by a membrane. The cytoplasm in a eukaryotic cell contains a variety of well-defined cell parts called organelles, each having a particular function in the operation of the cell. Humans and all other animals, as well as plants and fungi, are eukaryotes. All life is constructed on carbon-based chemistry, also called organic chemistry. Carbon typically forms up to 4 bonds at once, which can be arranged into long chains of atoms, interlocked rings, complex branching arrangements, and almost any other imaginable shape. Carbon has the ability to bond with other carbon atoms, as well as many other elements, notably hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, and sulfur. That's how carbon helps to form the backbones of all sorts of biological molecules, including proteins, carbohydrates, fats and oils, and DNA and RNA. Carbon, the most versatile chemical element of the periodic table, with diverse molecular functions, provide the building block of life. No other element has the potential to fulfill the twin defining characteristics of life, the ability to make copies and the ability to evolve. Organic matter refers specifically to compounds consisting of carbon atoms that are joined to other carbon atoms by a strong type of bond called a covalent bond. Covalent bonds involve the sharing of electrons among neighboring atoms, rather than the exchange of electrons as an ionic bond. Organic carbon compounds also commonly contain hydrogen, thus forming carbon-hydrogen compounds or hydrocarbons. Carbon-hydrogen bonds are sometimes explicitly included as part of the definition of organic compounds. The term organic usually implies that the compound is biotic, that is, alive once or presently alive, or of biologic origin. Some inorganic compounds may contain carbon as a constituent, for example, diamond, a mineral made of covalently bonded carbon that comes from deep within Earth's mantle. One common characteristic of organic compounds is their tendency to occur in long, chain-like structures called polymers. In polymerization, small molecules link together to form long chains or three-dimensional networks. Polymers that consist of organic compounds or of biological origin are called biopolymers. Several categories of organic compounds play key roles in biologic processes, and 3 of them are biopolymers: proteins, nucleic acids, and carbohydrates. The 4th important type of organic molecule that is not a polymer, but still fundamental to life, is lipids. Proteins are long, chain-like polymers made of amino acids bonded together. Up to 20 different amino acids may be combined into a protein polymer. The identity of a specific protein is determined by the sequence of the amino acids and by the shape of the protein molecule assumes as the chain folds. Within a folded protein molecule, certain parts of the polymeric chain will be exposed, while other parts will be hidden inside. Proteins play many roles. They provide structural support for organisms and help in the growth of tissues. Animals, for example, generate skin, hair, tendons, and muscles with the help of proteins. Proteins also help in the storage of energy and in the body's defense against foreign organisms and pathogens. Other proteins act as hormones, molecules that serve as chemical messengers, and as enzymes, molecules that speed up chemical reactions, such as the digestion of food. The production of proteins is directed by the two nucleic acids, DNA and RNA, that are responsible for storing and transferring genetic material. Nucleic acids are giant organic polymers built from molecules called nucleotides, each of which contains a sugar group, a phosphate group, and a nitrogenous base. A third type of biopolymer, carbohydrates, is a group of chemical compounds that are the basis of much of the food we eat. Carbohydrates, which include sugars, starches, and cellulose, are found in all organisms. They are molecules composed of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. Simple carbohydrates, called sugars, provide the energy that fuels plant and animal cells. For example, glucose. But glucose, in turn, is the building block of complex carbohydrates found in starch and cellulose. Starch is used by plants to store energy. Starch is the main carbohydrate in the human diet. Cellulose contains hundreds to thousands of glucose molecules bounded together. It is what gives strength to the roots, stems, bark, and leaves of plants. It is also the material from which insects and crustaceans build their hard shells made of chitin. Lipids form another important group of organic molecules. Lipids are not polymers and are chemically diverse, but they are grouped together because they do not dissolve in water. They include groups that accomplish important functions for organisms. Fats and oils store energy for later use. Phospholipids have molecular structures that consist of one water repellent or hydrophobic side and one water attracting or hydrophilic side. The cell membranes of animals is made of a double layer of phospholipids. Earth is the only planet on which we have confirmed the existence of life, past or present. 3 steps must have been accomplished on the way to the complex life forms we know today. Chemosynthesis of small organic molecules from inorganic precursors, biosynthesis, the polymerization of small organic molecules to form biopolymers, especially proteins, and the development of the complex chemical machinery needed for metabolism and replication. The specific mechanisms by which life originated and are still hypothetical, and we will discuss them in the next lecture.